Mhm.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited. Today we have a different guest, as in, I don't think I had any astrologer on my podcast before. So today I'm really excited to have Lisa with us. And she, wow, very long time sort of in this field. And I'm going to share with her introduction, her background in just a little bit. But I just want to say I met her not too long ago, and there's so much to learn from her, and I'm totally in love with astrology and how we can use it wisely in our life. So I'm super excited to have Lisa with us today. Welcome to my show.
That's lovely. I'm happy. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, so a little bit introduction about Lisa. She's a passionate astrologer, teacher, counselor, and Australian bushflower practitioner. She's obviously a lifetime lover of astrology and related modalities. And obviously, she has a lot and lots of trainings. So she has completed qualifications through astrosynthesis. She has a master level through Stephen Forrest's astrology program. I think if you're interested in astrology, people have heard of these big names. She also has a diploma in counseling and advanced certificates with Australian bushflower therapy. So lots and lots of qualification. She's the Australian representative for the Organisation of Professional Astrologers, OPA, and she's a member of the Federation of Australian Astrologers, FAA. So with all this background, so I can tell Lisa is really interested in learning and teaching and obviously in astrology. So I think my first question is going to be, how did you discover astrology and what kind of got you into spending so many years in learning in this particular modality?
What a good question. One I have definitely been asked a number of times. And I have to say, it goes right back to when I was a really little girl. And I always seemed to be surrounded by people that, my mother had a friend that was an astrologer and did I Ching and palmistry. And even from when I was like 7 years old, every time she was coming over to the house, I would be like, talk to me about astrology. And because I was so young, she was very respectful of not sort of saying too much. But anyway, from her to my first job where there was an astrologer that we used to do work for. And so I got my chart done when I was 14, and then again when I was 18, and again when I was sort of 21. And by that point, like, I'd really submerged myself as best as I could, because the internet was not a thing then. So it was the
Mm,
library and networking and all of that sort of thing to learn. So I really just always found myself in the right place at the right time. And from a very little person, when somebody would say to me, so what are you going to do when you grow up, Lisa? I would say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know it's going to be different. And I know it's going to be about helping people. And
mm,
that's what I knew in my heart, even when I was so small. So I guess I guess my soul came in to do this work. And thankfully, I heard, whatever was being offered to me, being put in the right place at the right time. And I just sort of followed my heart, and I was determined, because I had a grandmother that told me anything is possible if you put your mind to it. So that sort of is what, I just knew, even though I wasn't 100% sure what it was I was going to do, I knew it was going to be something like this. And then I just kept finding myself in the right place with the right teacher at the right time. And it just grew, right up until today, and everything that I've, since I got on a path of, I'm giving up all of my work, that like the work I first did as a very, very young person, and I am going to be a professional astrologer. And the minute that I actually said that out loud, it was like the universe went, okay, she's ready. And then all these doors opened.
mm.
And then I flowed from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other. And, Steve and Brian in Melbourne and other teachers, and doing my diploma, and the people that have cheered me on. Like, I've had lots of amazing friends and teachers and mentors that have been there to encourage me. So I hope that's a bit of a long-winded answer maybe, but
Actually,
that's sort
that's
of,
Well, definitely a follow-up question on that, because I know your background is also in counseling, and for lots of people, astrology still have a bit of witchy-wooey rap. The way I say it, there's a lot of mathematics, a lot of observing the natural phenomenon, and it's not so much witchy-wooey. I think in a way, because then maybe the modern times, if you read a girly magazine, you see, oh, Leo, this week may meet your lover, or that sounds very you know not very necessarily scientific, or wishy-washy in some way. But I don't know a lot about astrology, but for me it's definitely not. It's like so much more. It's really about pattern in the universe, timing, about how energy influence one another. So obviously, number one, I definitely want you to elaborate on that and sort of like change a bit of a misconception maybe for some people who think astrology is about read a horoscope and see who you're going to date next week or something. But the other part of it is that how are you going to reconcile that? I mean, I don't think anything happened for no reason. So the fact that you have the counseling background help you to talk to people or help people, in which you definitely were using astrology. So how do you reconcile this two particular modality?
Okay, that is such a good question because even today people do still view astrology as, and with no disrespect to the newspapers, because in some ways it puts the word astrology out into the community. But on the other hand, it also makes it something that for me and the way I practice astrology, it is not, because it is incredibly mathematical. It is incredibly spiritual. It is incredibly mythological and also very psychological. And, when you learn modern astrology is based on a lot of the psychological principles, on Jungian theories and all sorts, psychological urges and childhood and family systems, and all the things that a psychologist would work with are very astrologically embedded in the chart. So, it does encompass all of this. So it is definitely not woo-woo, although it is still viewed that it is a very profound way of working with the soul. And the soul, for most of us, I'm sure we believe, I know that you and I certainly do, and I'm sure lots of people that are listening will acknowledge that we are not just physical bodies, wandering around the planet, that we are, physical bodies that the soul has taken residence in this lifetime, and that soul has a very, very, very strong feeling, heart, memory that is the basis of everything we come into work on in this lifetime. So it is an incredibly deep, profound, like I said, and you said, spiritual, psychological, mathematical, mythological way of working with the cosmos and the soul in this human form, which is just so, it's unbelievable. Synchronicity and divine timing and sacred contracts are all part of it. So yes, it is something you still come up against.
Yeah,
it's
that's
so
why it's so
rich.
rich, and it takes decades to learn and master. And I know that I read that Carl Jung actually is very interested. Actually, understatement to say he's interested. I think he's actually an astrologer himself. I mean, he know a lot, enough for him to talk about it in a way that it shows me that he understand it, and how he really make the link. And there are some authors that particularly talked about astrology and psychology in that area. So definitely I find it's so fascinating. And for me, like when I first approached astrology, after passing all this stereotype, the first time I really find it's interesting is, when we look at a birth chart, like when you were born, all the planets around you line up in a certain way, certain angle, certain distance, and it depends where you are and when you were born. It's like a blueprint. It never will be the same because no one is going to line up exactly the same way. So that's your birth chart, right? Your blueprint. And then based on that, we can talk about some patterns, some tendencies and interesting, things. And then the second part, it's about your sacred contract, your soul contract, like you mentioned before, but also free will. And that's the way I look at astrology as a first step. What would you say to that? How would you explain to someone new? Is it the reason why we need to do the birth chart first?
Is it the reason that we do the birth chart first is to gain? Well, actually, let me go back and say, that chart, if we don't believe that's just random, which I certainly don't believe it is, and we've had that chart from the moment that we've taken our first breath, then what has occurred before we've taken our first breath for us to have the chart that we have? And, I believe that we choose that chart. That chart is all the nutrients and the ingredients for our fullest potential, to become the most authentic versions of ourselves in this lifetime. And so when we start with the birth chart, it gives us an opportunity to really understand what my soul has requested in this lifetime. That word karma, which we use, sometimes so often, and, or someone does something awful and like karma will get him, or, all of that. But really and truly, karma is repetition. So what has my soul asked to repeat in this lifetime for me to continue to work on the unresolved material? And that, for me, is the core of the chart. Looking at what we call the nodal axis, the south node and the north node is like the portal that the soul enters in with, this feeling memory that sets up everything in our lives. And yes, we absolutely do have free will. And so I feel what happens is, by gaining understanding into the natal chart, into the soul's request in this lifetime, that we can get on a road of awareness and consciousness. And of course, when we're open to receiving from the gods, from the universe, however you want to look at it, we become more aware and more conscious, and we can then make choices based on what we're receiving in a clearer way. And so free will works very much with the birth chart. People say, well, how do we have free, we have free will, so how does the chart work? But it's really just about synchronizing and embracing all of it and being open. And
completely agree. Like, even if someone say, I think I've heard someone say, if whatever planets in your whatever house, maybe you particularly tend to have a good musical ability or something, and you do very musical, but then what you're going to do about that given gift or talent, it's up to you. Whether you want to play it big, you want to practice and be really good at something, then I think that's a free will piece for me. That is still up to you what you're going to do about it. Like, even though you may be given a set of circumstance or gift or talent or capabilities or lack of it, it's still up to you what you're going to do about it. And so that leads to my second question. So how can we, in a broader term speaking, live strategically? So let's say I have a brief understanding of my birth chart, and I have a brief understanding of what's going on planetary wise. So how can we live more strategically? What's your take on that?
Oh, goodness, what another good question. How can we live more strategically? Well, I guess for me, how I live more strategically is following my path, being true to myself. Not, I guess as human beings, we all have challenges and strengths, and because there's so many pieces all interwoven, my need to shine is who I am, my need to find emotional security, my need to communicate in the way that's best for me, my way to define my values, like all of these things and more. Certainly awareness and consciousness. And I mean, there's so many wonderful modalities, of which astrology is obviously one of them, that we're able to gain, self-awareness. That's such a great starting point, to be aware of oneself. And there are other means, but certainly astrology is one of the best self-awareness tools I know. So I guess by wanting to be aware of oneself is the beginning of the path of then becoming more conscious. And when we're more conscious, hopefully, we withdraw the projections, we look inside ourselves for, when we're triggered, we bounce back from things, we grow a little more, we continue to evolve. Like evolution, awareness, consciousness, evolution, our fullest potential is a lifetime. It's not like a goalpost. Like all of a sudden, you're 46 years old and I have self-worth. That's it. I have self-worth. I can go work on something else now. It's a constantly evolving process. And, then we get tested, because if we say, I'm going to be strategic in the way I live my life, that means I need to be aware of who I am, and I need to be true to myself, and I need to get on my path, and I need to do it my way, because I've chosen this chart to support me to grow in every single way I possibly can. And it's not just, we're not singular beings, there's many dialogues and connections going on within us. So, sometimes one part of us, it's a bit like an orchestra, sometimes an orchestra needs a conductor, and sometimes the conductor may orchestrate the strings more, but other times they may orchestrate the percussion more, because they're the areas that need the work at that particular time. And then, of course, hopefully we can get them all to play together in a beautiful crescendo of, energy. And the chart is a little bit like that. There are periods of life and themes where we need to be a little more strategic around this area of my life, because I need to grow this. So once I do that, I can then have a foundation where I can grow that. And I know certainly in my life, and I'm sure in yours as well, we have chapters where, we need to end one chapter for another chapter to begin. And I think all of these things are part of the strategies of clarity and centeredness and focus and, growth, which is what, we all come in here to be the best versions of ourselves based on what the soul knows it needs to work on, because it has not been completed in previous lifetimes. So it's such a big question that you've asked, and I love it. But being strategic, I think, is really, if I just boil it down, is about really being true to yourself.
And true to your
and getting on that path.
True to your chart.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like I don't know whether you remember, obviously Lisa read my chart before, and I have Libra rising, and I'm Leo, sun in Leo, and moon in Cancer. So that is sort of the three major point, and so it kind of who I am in many ways, and that in some way tells me my strength and weakness or shadow aspect, which you can read from the chart, but you can also think about your behavior or history, right? So you kind of like compare the two and see where it falls. But I do think that it helps me more strategic in the sense that when you know who you are and maybe where you are in your life, then you make different choices, or you hopefully make choices that are more aligned with that, and so your life will be more harmonious. And that, when I say strategic, because I think some people look at the word strategic as in it's about winning the game. Strategic, it's about making more sales or something, like it's all tied up with the business world. But for me, it's about how we're going to align with all this information so we make our life easier, more harmonious for ourselves and others. So, and I think you gave me a perfect answer. And it leads to my next question, which is about evolution astrology. What's the difference between astrology, or, is there a difference? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So evolution, okay, so there's different fields in astrology, just for anyone that's listening. Someone could become a medical astrologer, or they could become, a traditional astrologer or a modern astrologer, or there's all sorts of areas that you can branch into. So probably the three most, I don't want to say most popular, but maybe the three roads that are taken the most would be maybe traditional astrology, modern astrology, which is psychological astrology and modern astrology, they're the same thing, and evolutionary astrology. And even though for me, I feel like evolutionary astrology is the absolute, it's so rich and it just comes from the roots of everything. It's also an astrology that perhaps is sometimes looked at as, well, that's a bit different, but it actually is just so soulful. So, modern astrology, traditional astrology is what was practiced before the outer planets were discovered. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, before their discoveries, it was a traditional astrologer. So, and today there are still traditional astrologers that do not take Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto into account when they're working astrologically. So that would be a traditional perspective, and that they do have a different way of looking at things, although we'll still talk about some similarities, of course. And then a modern astrologer, like you were saying before with Jung, they use Jungian principles and psychological, that this comes from childhood and this is this and this is that. Again, you're still going to hear a similar essence, but it comes, for me, I feel like modern astrology is a little bit more of a clinical approach in its way it may be presented. Whereas evolutionary astrology is very much about the soul. Why has the soul chosen this chart? Why has it chosen to have, the sun in Leo and the moon in Cancer? What is the soul's request? Because I have, and I would have more than likely said to you, I love the image of the soul sitting with their angels before they, jump off into this manifestation. And, they've just signed the contract, which is all the things that we've agreed to, all the things I need to scare me so I can develop courage, all the things, that I need to experience so that I can pick up from where I left off, so I can, really work on the unresolved material and grow who I'm here to become. So the perspective, we're still going to talk about the sun in Leo, for example, whereas, you may hear astrologers say, well, you're confident and you're colorful and you're flamboyant and, you're self-expressive and creative. And all of those things, of course, are, they're layer one, the first layer of Leo. But from an evolutionary perspective, we're going to say that the soul has chosen to have the sun in Leo because, you're here to learn confidence and creativity and self-expression and to develop self-approval and self-love. This isn't something we just do like that. It's something that we're here to evolve, to shine, to define our personality. The end point of a Leo sun is the evolution of personality. And so from an evolutionary perspective, we look that the soul has made this request and this is what we're growing. This is our potential. And why have we chosen it? And I think that question of energy has to, everything is energy. So the sun in Leo is an energy that will express a strength and a challenge, but it's also underlying that has a potential for its fullest, most authentic self. But underneath that is, why have I chosen it? And that's probably what, for me, separates evolutionary astrology out a little bit from the other forms, is it asks, why have I chosen this chart? And when we can understand why I have the sun in this or Mercury in that or the south node here or the north node there, whatever we're looking at, why? That's the healing. Because this, when you talk to the soul, it really hears you, and it can be very unspoken because it's so much, in the DNA of our astrological blueprint. But when someone talks to you in a way that's your feeling essence, you really feel heard. And so it's not to say a modern astrologer can't do that or a traditional astrologer can't do that. because every astrologer is also a human being and everyone is different. So everyone's going to have a different perspective and interpretation. But evolutionary astrology for me stands out differently because it really, really works with why the soul has chosen to have this chart and what is its fullest or authentic potential from it.
I also really believe often this type of deep, meaningful, soulful conversation actually need an invitation. As in, when you open up that conversation, extend the invitation through astrology or other modalities, whatever that is, then your soul will share more, as in it will start to open more, or the synchronicity kicks in, then more things come up, or maybe you're just simply more aware of it all together, all counts. But in a way is that you make that step to invite and say, let me go deeper than just the basic level of who I am, why I'm here and what am I doing. I think that for me, that invitation, it's really important, because we don't learn to do this. It's in, no one teaches us. Sometimes you figure it out somewhat, or you bump into a teacher, or you just are more soul searching type of person. But that invitation is important. I think the way you described to me, I think evolution astrology definitely help us to extend that invitation.
I think, yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. It really does. It taps into something that's just, that's very soulful and allows that to open up. So it's,
So we're going to switch gear a tiny bit to wrap this up, but I really want to ask you your take on, 2021 has been still a turbulent year. A lot of things are happening. When this episode go out, probably will be in July, August time. So we're in the second half of the year. Can you tell us a little bit more about, I don't know whether you want to take approach or perspective from the global or Australia, but tell us a little bit about 2021. What are the themes, or what is in store? What should we pay attention to maybe to better navigate the second half of the year?
Oh my goodness. I love your questions. They're so profound. And I think I heard most of that because just the internet just broke up a little bit. So you just to clarify, what should we pay attention to with just energetically what is going on? So that's sort of what you were saying?
Yeah, the rest of 2021. And it could come from Australia perspective, because I think each country can have its own chart, right? As well as the globe, the earth.
Absolutely.
So whichever perspective you want to take, or you have more want to say.
Yeah, okay. So I'm very much a person-centered astrologer. And of course I look globally and collectively. And that's a question I probably really like to map out over 6 months, particularly if I was looking at Australia. But just generally, to answer that generally, because it is a big question and deserves a big answer, which I'm maybe not able to give you right now. But I will say, collectively, we all live on this planet. And I remind myself that a lot because, I have family that are all over the world, and we are actually a united collective force, which is important to remember. And so collectively, society today, be it society here in Australia, society in Europe, society in Asia, wherever we're talking about, we are all feeling the influences of what is going on. And that is, of course, impacting us all in relation to, just let me give an example, it might be easier. So right now, the transiting nodes are in the signs of Sagittarius, South Node, Gemini, North Node. So the North Node in Gemini is impacting all of us, both collectively and personally. So from a collective level, what does the North Node in Gemini offer us as societies and as mankind? It asks us to find our voice. It asks, and Gemini is also in Mercury. Say that again. Mercury is also in Gemini. So we've got a very strong mercurial Gemini energy. And the North Node is asking us, if I just, the North Node is like if all of a sudden out of the sky, this hand came down saying, take my hand because I want to take you somewhere. I want to lead you somewhere because this is what you need to pay attention to. So that's, the transiting North Node is a little bit different to how we might look at the North Node in someone's natal chart. But either way, it is a guiding force. So collectively or globally, we're being asked to go towards Gemini, go towards Mercury. And that says, we need to communicate with each other. We need to find our voice. We need to speak up. We need information. Don't just expect me to do this if you're not telling me, giving me the information so I can make up my own mind. I feel like information, how we process it, how we share and connect with each other, how we speak our truth, all of these things are super important on a global level. And I think it's something we're really being asked to do. And of course, Mercury rules Gemini. And so it's a little bit like having a double whammy. The ruler of the North Node is traveling with the North Node in its natural rulership. So it's really pushing us to really use our minds and make our, really create our own paths and not just be pushed or led in directions that we don't understand. So I think that's really important. Personally, of course, we all have that North Node in Gemini impacting us on a personal level, which is going to be intertwined with our personal journey that we're coming in here working on, which is, of course, going to be different for everyone. But certainly, and also now, just another little thing, Jupiter at the moment is in Pisces. It's retrograde. It's going to go back into Aquarius in July. And then towards the end of the year, I think the very end of December, it goes back into Pisces direct, where it will stay. But Jupiter in Pisces retrograde, Neptune is in Pisces retrograde, and both of these energies in some way are almost like floating out in the ocean, and either we have a boat with no oars or we just have no boat. And we're really just being asked in some ways to go within, to find time to reflect, to find a new sense of faith in ourselves. Both these planets, are connected because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. Jupiter is the co-ruler because it was the ruling planet before Neptune was discovered. And the fact that they are both in Pisces, which it rules, really again is strengthening this energy to go inward, to reflect, to find ways of doing it differently. Retrograde periods are wonderful opportunities for revision, for realignment, for redirection. So Neptune will be retrograde for about 5 months. So, taking us almost to the end of the year. Jupiter will not go, we'll go back into Aquarius. So we go from feeling to thinking in Aquarius. Pisces is water, Aquarius is air. And then we come back into Pisces in a direct motion. So really, I think between now and the end of the year will offer us a great opportunity to really, what I was just saying, to redefine, realign, redirect, to reanalyze how we can do it differently in relation to our faith, our spirituality, our union collectively and really come out of this year with a new vision. I think
wonderful. I think it is so brilliant because I definitely agree with a lot of things that you said, like, discern what the media or the information you get and then form your own opinion. And it's a great time to rethink, recharge, and, realign before we're going to speak our thought as well. And it's going to change again, as you said, early next year when we're moving, when Jupiter is going back to Aquarius. I'm catching on.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay, so to wrap up, really want to know how can people find you? What's the best way to contact you? Maybe tell us your website and what's the best way to work with
sure.
you, maybe get the chart done, or I know that you also run events and workshops. So tell us a little bit about where they can find you as a first step.
Okay, so they can either on Facebook, my work, my page is Aquarius Rising, Wellbeing, Counseling and Coaching. It's a bit of a mouthful, but
Oh, I will put the link on
Aquarius.
the and on the note, so that's easy for
Okay,
people to click.
so that, and also, the website www.aquariusrising.net.au,
Mm-hmm.
which is always being revised, and there's always, I look at it and go, oh, there's something else I can do. So there's always information there, and all my contact details are obviously on both of those.
Yep.
And I do, and yes, I do lots of stuff like you do on Skype, and so it doesn't matter where somebody is, it's always possible to connect. And I'm very open, just if people have questions, if that's all it ends up being, I'm really, really happy to answer questions, or just to, be there to offer whatever it is someone might, if they've got an inquiry, it's just, I'm very open and happy to answer any questions. But I did want to just say one last thing too. One other little thing that I do, which I'm very passionate about, even though it's only maybe a small thing, is once or twice a year, I take people on pilgrimages in Greece. Now, of course, I haven't been able to do that, which I'm busting to get back, because Greece is such a beautiful spiritual centre. But next year in May, and then in September, let's say September, because May is almost full, I have one of these sacred site trips happening, and they're 14 days with our own bus, doing work on ourselves, learning astrology, doing dream works, learning Greek mythology, going to the sacred sites, feeling the energy. And it's a really beautiful sacred time, like pilgrims. We travel, each trip is different, each one has a different theme. That's also on the website, and they're really beautiful trips, and I'm very passionate about them. So I'd love, if anybody has questions about that, please, I'm sure by next year, when things will start to change and we can travel, that, it's something someone might be interested in. And Greece is beautiful for anyone that hasn't been there. It's a really
It is
amazing place.
and it's a perfect background for learning
But anyway, the website,
mythology, astrology, and all that stuff.
oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, it all goes together.
So thank you so much, Lisa, for today's interview, and I will make sure you have all the website and social handles in the link below. And I just really want to thank you for this wonderful time together, and it's super interesting, and I hope a lot of people can find you online to learn more about astrology.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank you, because I know you are also doing amazing work, and you're such an inspiring woman, and I'm very honored to be here to sit and talk to you today. So I want to thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Okay.